So thank you all for joining, and let's start. Let me put in the agenda and turn off the music because this started to get really frantic over here in my in my headphones. Cool. So just a quick reminder that this recording will be available in 24 hours for everyone to check, and we also have like a lot of other workshops in YouTube, so you can take a quick look over there. Um, we're gonna reach out to a couple people as well to ask like a little bit of feedback about these workshops, if we are striking the right chords, if you guys would like us to talk about specific features, what do you want to see next, and so on and so forth. So please keep in tune relate about that. And if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat or in the QA over here. Okay. So our agenda today is to talk about the new feature that's the cut and fill to a specific surface. Then we're going to jump into some best practices related to the sequence creation. Then we're going to talk about something that's coming soon. It's the dynamic tree. This is a very important update that we're going to do that's going to help a lot of people while using the sequencing creation and stuff like that. And we are going to finish with some tips and tricks. Okay. So please interact with us as much as you can over here in the chat, and let's keep on going. Okay. So the first thing that I want to talk about today is the cut filter surface. This is something that a lot of our customers have been requesting because especially related to two specific use cases. One is to create a rough grading stage where you're going to clean up the area without having to create a flat bottom or something like that. And the other one is to do a backfill to the original terrain, right? So before what happened is that you could only do a cut to a specific elevation or a fill to a specific elevation, like you can see over here on the top part of this terrain. And now what you can do is do a cut using the terrain as your reference, so it's an offset from the terrain, both going down or going upwards. Okay, so let's jump into a scenario that we're going to show how that works. Okay, so this is a scenario that probably like a lot of you have seen already before. Like it's the scenario related to the construction of Brock Commons, and I'm gonna show what it would look like when you want to do the rough grading stage, then the bulk excavation, and then a backfill. Okay, so I have my stages created over here already, where we're gonna work with rough grading, two bulk excavation stages, and then a backfill. Not gonna dwell too much on the tower construction stage, okay? So let's go into the first milestone that I have the work over here. So I have the project start, the mobilization, and now let's work with the rough grading. So whenever you're creating an excavation, you need something as a reference, and the reference can both be your building, right? You can turn on your building temporarily to by going over here and doing a temporary show, and this will give you the location of the building, the location of the terrain, oh, sorry, of the foundations. But you can also just turn on one specific level if it's easier for you to work with it, or you can even not turn them on, but in the excavation, when you're creating your sketch, you can simply select one of the parts over here, and those parts will be highlighted for you, so you can use those as a reference instead of like turning them on and off, right? Sometimes it's easier, but also you can always use your drawing as a reference. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the the cut. And this is what we're going to do right now is the rough grading. So the rough grading, we are not going to use the terrain per se. Oh, sorry, the model per se. I'm just going to use the shape of what we have over here. So I'm going to click and draw a shape of my, just to clear up this terrain over here following the curve. And again, I could use my model as an example, but I'm going to just like clear up this area, just thinking that I'm going to do like a bigger clearance of the area instead of just like following a specific shape of the building. Okay, once I close my excavation sketch, by default, we are gonna always start with the cut to depth. So this is what we had up to now. This first option over here is what you have been using so far, right? So the cut to depth, you cut to a flat bottom, and when you click done, you have that flat bottom created using that shape as a reference. Okay, but what we're gonna show today in terms of updates is that now we have this little button over here that's called cut to terrain. So this will apply an offset to the current terrain that you have over here. So let's say that I want to do a little rough grading that's going to remove around 10 centimeters of this terrain. And when I hit done, now you see that the cut that is created is actually following the shape, the terrain, just removing that like the top layer of the soil. Okay. I'm working right now with meters, but of course, if you wanted to work with feet and you want to say like you want to remove maybe like 1 feet, you can just do a mathematical operation over here to convert this into feet. Okay. All values inputs in cmBuilder allows you to do a mathematical operation, so you can always create a quick operation for conversion over here if you need so. Cool. So you see that you're gonna have like this new terrain created over here with that as reference. So keep in mind that this also applies to custom terrains. So in this case over here, I have a custom terrain created, right? So I'm using this. It just did a quick adjustment over here on one side of the terrain. So it's using that as a reference. And what we want to do in the future is to have the ability for you to use a custom terrain as your initial state, but you can also do a cut or a fill to another terrain that you have created, right? So this is the current feature that we have right now. You use a default terrain that can either be the one that is automatically created in cmBuilder or one that you have adjusted, but the cuts and fills will use that only the current terrain as a reference. And in the future, we're going to be able to use two terrains. So you can do a cut to a terrain or a fill to a terrain. Okay. So this is interesting because sometimes you might have the need to adjust the terrain that you have at the moment, but also you have already like a set of a proposed grade. So like if you do have a drawing that shows what is the grade that you're going to have to do in the future, you can use that as well, create the second terrain and do the cut or fill to a proposed grade. Cool. So this is going to give you more accuracy in terms of your QTOs and so on and so forth. So now that I'm done with my rough grading, I can go ahead and do my bulk excavation number one. And in this one, for this one specifically, I'm going to use my model as a reference. So I'm going to click to create a cut, and then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to highlight basically where the structure is in this level. And I can see right away over here that I did my rough grading completely wrong, right? It's supposed to be in another shape, but that's no problem. We can simply go into the cut again over here and adjust the sketch, right? But just for now, I'm gonna ignore that a little bit, and we're gonna create a new cut using my structure as a reference. So just to be a little bit quicker, I'm gonna create only a cut only for the half of this building, and create half of it, and I'm not going to do a cut to surface because I want to have a flat bottom for this one, right? So when I'm done with it, like I'm going to have now that new excavation, and on the bulk excavation number 2, I'm going to go ahead and create the second half of this cut. Okay, so it's going to be something like this and complete. Cool. So now when I hit done, I can click somewhere else and see what is the result. But you can see over here right away that the second cut is deeper than the first one. And the reason why is because when I created the second cut, the first point that I selected was a point that was lower in the terrain. So my cut is creating the depth counting from that first spot, right? So this is pretty standard, like most of the people already know about this, but you can change the elevation of your sketch by simply clicking on this button and clicking on a point on your map, and then the elevation of your sketch is going to follow. And not just the sketch, but anything that would have this point, this icon over here, means that you can grab an elevation from the map and put that elevation as your value in here. So for example, now I just made the bottom of my elevation fit the bottom of the previous excavation that I had before. Cool. So now I have my rough grading stage, my bulk excavation stage, and then my second bulk excavation stage. So my building is completed, and now I need to create a backfill to bring back my terrain to the original position, right? So to do that, I will just create a fill operation, and I can follow the shape of the fill over here. It doesn't need to be super like perfect, because the fill is gonna create a shape up to the original terrain. So even if your shape, your overall sketch for the fill is a little bit bigger, no problem, because when you do a fill to terrain and you keep the offset 0, it will only fill up the part that is different from the original terrain. Okay, so now you have your steps for excavation, right? So rough grading, using the original terrain as a reference, 2 bulk excavations for a flat bottom, and then you execute your tower, and now you have a backfill to the original height of the terrain. However, what can we do with these colors, right? So the colors of the excavation are also like a huge thing, because you want to highlight what are the actions that you are working at the moment. And when you do a backfill, you want to bring this to the original color or to a drawing that you have imported. So to do that, we are going to use a combination of the zoning tool plus the excavation plan colors. So we're going to go over here, my excavation plan, in the edit excavation settings, I can turn my excavation color to follow whatever it is on the original background. So if there is any zones projected in here, labels projected, lines, drawings, or anything projected on this area for the excavation, it would show those objects projected in here, because it's taking whatever is on the original background and putting that color on your excavation, right? So now what I'm going to do is, in the rough grading stage, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a zone that will follow the shape of this rough grading, right? So I'm just going to quickly draw this. And in one of our past workshops, we also showed how you can create a template shape of with using a massing to keep reusing the sketch of the massing every time that you need to draw the same shape all over again, right? So if I had created a template for my massing, I wouldn't need to draw the zone again. I would simply project the shape of the massing all over, okay? So now that I created this zone, by default, the timeline for the zone is going to show is going to be defined that the zone is going to start on this active milestone, but I also want it to be gone by this stage, or I can even keep it until the end, just to keep that going, right? So on the next stage, I can go ahead and do another zone in here that's going to follow that same shape. Again, always good to draw on using a 2D view, and you can use the command over here in the bottom to change from 2D to 3D, or use that shortcut Shift T. Okay, so now for the excavation itself, I'm going to use a different color. I'm just going to use red as an example, and then for the next one, I'm going to do the same thing. And if you want to highlight that excavation just for one specific moment, you can set up your timeline to fit on that specific moment, right? And now everything is done. But when I do my backfill, when I go to the backfill stage, you see that I can see all the zones. So before I get to my backfill stage, I'm going to select the zones and I'm going to end them on the milestones, right? So let's end the zone in here, and let's end this zone in here. So when I go to the next stage, the backfill brings you back to your original stage. So basically, because the excavation colors are taking whatever is projected on the map, you can control which colors each of one of these operations will have in different points in time. Okay, so this is great because you can also, sorry, we are gonna do an update on this feature as well that will allow you to do that without having to use the zones. So I'm not sure exactly when it's coming, but I think it's going to be like a month from now, where you will be able to control the colors of the excavation per operation and per milestone. Okay. So Shane, go ahead, Kyle. Sorry, Kyle, your mic is very, very weird.
My apologies. Is it good now?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll just jump in, and it's actually in 2 weeks.
2
weeks
weeks
away. Yeah.
Nice. That's great. Better than I was imagining. Cool. So that's how you would manage your excavation steps using both the cuts to a flat bottom or to a existing grade. Okay. And you can use the zones to just manage what you're highlighting in each one of those milestones. Cool. So let's go now to the next step of our presentation today. That is to discuss best practices on sequence creation. So sequence creation in working with imported models, it's very, very important to understand some of the logics because it will affect the appearance and the tree structure that you have. How you convert the model into cmBuilder affects what is the final result that you're going to see, right? And this is just because different file formats carry different types of information and different softwares export things to different file formats in a different way, right? So it's like, I know that it's a little bit confusing, but I'm going to use today this example of a Revit file, and I'm going to show you what it looks like and what is what your tree structure looks like if you go through different paths of conversion. Okay, so this is the picture that shows the original Revit file, and I have over here a scenario that shows the same model converted in 3 different ways. So let's see what it looks like when you have them side by side. So the first one, this model over here, is a model that is a Revit file that was converted into an NWC file, open in Navisworks, and then exported to an FBX file. Okay, and then brought into cmBuilder. So what can we see from this file over here is that one, the colors are maintained, right? So when you compare with the original color of your Revit file, the colors are maintained correctly. So another aspect of this is that there are no transparency carried over to cmBuilder. And that's because FBX files, they do not carry transparency with that, right? So they are only solid colors. So you can see over here that on the original file, we have some transparency with these windows and these panels, but those did not come over to cmBuilder because FBX did not carry that type of information. And also, it does not show the complex edges for complex surfaces. So compare it to this one over here, for example, that you see all the edges for these complex surfaces, and also compare to the original file that you can see that, right? So this model conversion method does not show the edges for complex surfaces. The tree, let me just compare the model appearance first, then we're gonna compare the tree structure, okay? So now, this second method of conversion, where you go from Revit file, you export an IFC file, open that in Navisworks, and then export an FBX, you're going to notice that the colors will change slightly. So compared to the first model, you see that some colors have changed. Also, we don't have any transparency because it's an FBX file, but because this was converted to IFC, we can now see the lines on complex surfaces, right? So this use case is more common for people that are handed an IFC directly from the consultant. Like sometimes people talk to me and they say like, oh, I only have an IFC file. So what can I do with this? You can open that in Navisworks and convert to FBX, or simply import that to cmBuilder directly. Sometimes you need to open that in Navisworks if you want to do further adjustments on the model before you convert, okay? And the third method over here is the one that we suggest people to do the most because it's simpler, but it changes the colors of your model a little bit more because it's just like how these information is applied to the file. So the colors will change further As you can see over here, from the first one to the second one to the last one, there are more changes related to the color, and but the parts are transparent, right? Because this is an IFC file and not an FBX file. You can see that there is a transparency to the parts, and because this is an IFC file directly, it also has the visible edges for complex surfaces. Okay, so this is related to transparency. Oh, sorry, to the model appearance, the different things that you're gonna have after that. Now let's understand the tree structure, because this is the tree structure affects the most like our efficiency when we are creating sequences, right? So if I open the tree structure over here, the first one that shows a model that was Revit to NWC to FBX, it will give you a tree structure. Oh, sorry, I don't know why I closed this part. Let me just put them side by side again. You see a tree structure that has several levels. So if I open one of these levels, I can open and keep opening them, and you're going to see a lot of different groups per Revit family. And then when you open it again, you're going to see different types of families inside of that family. Oh, sorry, Revit categories, and then you have your families described underneath that, up to a point that you're going to like now start selecting the individual objects and the individual parts. Okay, so this is a more kind of like complex tree structure, but it also give you like expose you like the file structure pretty well in using the Revit information, because it's following the family hierarchy. Sorry, the Revit family hierarchy. The only caveat on this one is that you cannot apply any of the features inside cmBuilder. The features are directly correlated with IFC files, because our features are using the IFC classes and IFC attributes to allow you to feature the elements on the tree. Okay, so now let's go to the second option, where it's whenever you bring a Revit file to an IFC, and then you open that in Navisworks and export an Navisworks. Oh, sorry, an FBX file. Whenever a file is converted into IFC, the IFC attributes are embedded into those parts, and Navisworks will read that IFC class and will create an FBX file using that IFC class structure instead of the Revit file structure, right? So the big difference between these two over here is that one follows the Revit family hierarchy and the other one follows the IFC class structure. So if I start opening this, instead of like seeing the Revit families in here, I'm actually seeing the IFC structure, but these are just the names of the groups. You still cannot use the features, because overall this is still an FBX file. Okay. And the last one is whenever you work with a Revit file directly exporting an IFC and bringing them into cmBuilder. So this one will produce like a tree structure that it's less complex and less kind of like has less levels, because it goes up to the point where you see the definition of levels for the buildings. But when you open that, everything inside is going to be a flat list. There's no further grouping or hierarchy inside below the story level hierarchy. Okay. So this will limit a little bit what you can see on this view, but the good thing about this part is that now you can use your IFC filters to like only select parts on your model. For example, if I want to select only doors, I can click on this, and you see that the other files are gone, right? So this file I cannot see these two files anymore because these are FBX files. But when I apply this, now I can see only the IFC. And if I select any of these groups, it will only select the doors inside, because it will only select the objects that meet the criteria of my filters. Even if I select the whole model, it will only select the objects that meet my criteria. Okay, so this is an interesting way of visualizing that, and we have an update coming that's going to make this even better for you to choose, because you can also you will also be able to see the IFC structure inside the file directly. Okay, Hopefully this part was not very too boring. It was more to show you like the comparison with like what I see that most of our customers use, where like you have like different conversion methods. Okay. So now that we understand that part, let's talk about some best practices in terms of creating a sequence, right? So let me move this to the side over here, and I'm gonna use this project over here as an example. It's the same model, but inside a context of an actual um, project, like simulation. Okay. So the first thing that I like to do whenever I'm creating a sequence is to create a clean view in which I can focus only on the model, right? So this is something that I've been telling the customers a lot because it makes it simpler for you to work with cmBuilder. It's not a requirement, but it's a good practice, right? So first thing that I do is I create a placeholder milestone before anything is happening on the site. So I already have a sequence created over here, and let me temporarily hide the model first. So we can see the sequence that is created without the model, right? So I have a sequence that has an excavation, elements on the site, blah, 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 right? So if I deactivate my temporary hide and show, my models will come back. And I want to create a placeholder milestone before everything. And the reason why I do that is because every object in resource and drawings and zones that are assigned to my project won't show up on this placeholder milestone because it's something that's created before the timeline of the project exists, right? So this is a placeholder milestone. And when I do that, everything else that is attached to my milestone is going to go away from my view. Okay. So after creating this placeholder milestone, also what I usually do is I simply hide the surrounding buildings in the terrain, because if I keep the surrounding buildings in the view, every time that I'm using the lasso selection, if I select a surrounding building by mistake first, I won't be able to select anything related to my building. Okay, so I usually just turn them on, off, and because I want to also see things that are underground, if I do have an excavation created, the boundary of the excavation might be in front of the way and whatnot. So I just go ahead and remove the terrain from my view as well. Okay, keep in mind that doing this over here will affect what is the first view that you see once you open the scenario. So after you're done with your sequence, just turn those two back on. Cool. And also, I can use a lot of the temporary hide and show to remove parts from my view that I'm not worried about right now. So for example, let's say that I want to do a sequence just for the structure at the moment. Instead of like having the architectural model showing in front of me, you can simply do a temporary hide and those parts will go away. And now you can focus only on the structure, and then you can bring back your architecture and then work with the architectural file. Okay. Another interesting thing to do is to check if there is any overlapping parts in your model. So this model over here, for example, I have a structural model and an architectural model, but the structure for the levels below ground are also, you can also see that on the architectural file. So I don't want these two parts to be overlapped. So I can simply go in here and hide my structural element, and I'm using the shortcut H to do the temporary hide or show. And I can either select these parts from my view and then disconnect them from my timeline, or I can simply go in here and select all of these parts from my 3D, my model browser or the tree structure, and disconnect them from the timeline. This is important because sometimes you simply import something by mistake that you don't want to see in there, and you can simply remove it from your timeline completely, and those parts will be hidden by default. Okay. Another thing that's coming soon is the ability for you to of your delete parts of your imported model. Cool. Okay. So this is how you create a clean view for you to start working from that. So you see over here, I have my placeholder milestone, and I have only the parts that are relevant for me to work at the moment. So I'm gonna show two different methods of selecting parts. One from the like using the 3D space and using the 3, right? But you can use both at the same time. They are completely compatible with each other. You can simply just use whatever it's easier for you at the moment. So on my placeholder milestone, the first thing that I'm going to do is focus only on the structure. So let's go ahead and do a temporary hide for my architectural model. And let's understand a couple of things about lasso selection in the 3D view. So lasso selection, you're simply going to hold control and you're going to create a box selection. This box selection will select whatever it touches. It doesn't need to encompass the whole object geometry to select it. It will select whatever it touches. And sometimes it's also easier to work with a topographic view because then you can kind of like get rid of the angles of perspective and select only things within the same elevation. Okay, so lasso selection, hold control and do that. You can also, instead of like drag your box, you can keep holding control and then select parts of your model to add it to the active selection. And if I selected parts by mistake, like this, for example, I can hold control and shift to do a lasso deselection. Okay, so for example, I want to select only the foundation parts over here, and I do that. Now I can do a lasso deselection and take whatever is above the foundation level out of my active selection. Cool. So you can also use control and unselect, deselect parts. And from here, you can just go do a right click and do an edit model element and then assign those parts to the milestones that you want. Cool. I also use a lot of shortcuts in terms of like using the H function to do a temporary hide, or Shift T to go from 2D to 3D, and so on and so forth. Using shortcuts in general is always a good practice because it makes you work faster. But also you can use the shortcuts to define a begin from this milestone and end at this milestone. When you're working with a placeholder, that doesn't really help because you're going to be only assigning parts to the active milestone. But let's say that you want to go forward and then you want to go to a milestone and then say, I want all of these parts to start over here at this milestone, then you can use these shortcuts as well. Okay, but also I use the shortcuts control arrow left and right to go to the first and to the last milestones, but also the arrows left and right to go back and forth on the milestones. Cool. Another thing that is interesting is that you can, with the 3D view, you can also go ahead and like keep the side sheet open whenever you do this thing over here. You do like add model element. This side sheet will remain if you select other things. So you don't need to confirm one and then click on the other to keep going on your milestone assignment. You can simply keep this open. You assign parts. Let's say I want to assign all of these foundation parts to the foundation milestone. So I'm gonna right click, edit model element, put them on the foundation finish, and then now I can keep that side sheet open and then work with the other parts. Sorry, I closed the side sheet by mistake. But basically, selecting and deselecting things over here, keeping the side sheet open is an interesting way of working as well. Cool. And the last thing about the 3D view is using this sequencing view. So now we have a new category in here that is the disconnected from timeline. This will be turned off by default, but whenever you turn it on, you will be able, right now they're kind of temporary hidden over here. So you see all of these beige parts are the parts that are disconnected from my timeline. So before they were aggregated with the unsequenced elements, now you have those two separated, so you can simply remove that from your view completely. And basically, when you work with your sequencing view in the color filters, when you click on them, it doesn't mean that those parts are going to go back to the original color. It just means that they're going to go away from your view, right? And by default, you're going to be seeing a wireframe like this. It's a little bit overwhelming, and we are changing this. This wireframe is going to look better in a couple weeks. But for now, if you don't want to see the wireframe, you can simply go into your settings, graphics, and turn off the building edges, and those wireframes are going to be gone. Okay. And just a quick reminder about what these parts are. Basically, you're just like checking the things that are and seeing where they are assigned into your milestone. So if I just go ahead over here and put these parts on the, I'm just gonna go ahead and put like in the milestone in the future over here. Now you can see like where these parts are in your timeline. So let me just hide all the resources. So you can see where these parts are in your timeline compared to other elements in your view. Okay. So this is in the past compared to this milestone, and this is assigned to this current milestone. But this is something that we already covered before. So let's move to the next part, which is the selection from the tree. Selection from the tree is something that like a lot of people don't use that much, but I really like the selection from the tree because it already provides you a group for those parts. So it will help you select parts faster. So one thing that I use a lot and depends a lot where like how your model is structured, but is the search function, right? So if I want to hide for some reason, I want to hide all of these doors, I will click on the door and this will show me in the tree structure where that door is. So if I go up and find like what is the higher the parent for that door object, I can now simply check what is the name of the door over here. For example, retail storefront. So if I put in retail storefront over here on the top and hit enter, now I can click to select the model. It will only select the parts that will fit this search criteria. Okay. So whenever you have a search applied to your tree or a filter applied to a tree, when you will only be able to select those parts that meet those criteria over here on your tree structure. You won't select anything else, even if you select the top parent and whatnot. Okay, so this is a great way to group the parts that you want to assign to a specific milestone and select them all at once. And also from the selection tree, I already talked about this, but the IFC filters is a very, very good friend whenever you're working with an IFC file because it will allow you to filter your view by that IFC class using the story and so on and so forth. So please use that whenever you want. Okay. And the idea of working with multiple files is that whatever if you have multiple files as over here, like FBX files, IFC files, step files, and whatnot, and they're all in this list, everything that you do will apply for the whole all the files at once. So if you want to really focus on one specific file at a moment, let's say you really want to like spend the next couple hours or like 1 hour working with a very complex structure sequence, you can simply go into the architectural model and you can remove that from your view. Sorry, you can remove that from your scenario by clicking on the imported model in here and then go in here and then remove that from your scenario. If you bring back that model, it will show in the same position and you won't lose any of the work that you have done, right? So you just like removing it temporarily. So your tree structure will focus only on the parts that you want. And then when you bring it back, the position of that model will be on the right location. Cool. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of like this quick tips and tricks about like creating selection sets, not selection sets, sorry, like active selections. And this selection set, something that we are working on the future and we'll be able to provide as well, like some saved selection groups and things like that. But let's say, for example, as just like a last example about this effort is if I wanted to select all of these wall types in my view, what I would do, right? So basically, I just gonna expand my tree structure and I'm gonna click on that wall and I'm gonna see which type of wall I have over here. And then I can just go ahead and put in like, for example, type K1. And now I will only have those walls selected if I go up and then click on the model and then I have it like that. So I had a customer the other day that he had an architectural file that had the structural walls were in the architectural file and the structural file only had the slabs and columns on the parking level. So how he was able to create a sequence of the structural walls using the architectural file was using the search function, because they were not very well classified on the IFC. So he had to use the search function to do that, and he could create his whole sequence in in less than 30 minutes. Cool. So now let's go into our next feature, like a feature that's coming soon and is very important, is the dynamic tree viewer, because it resonates with the sequencing creation. But we are working on one right now. We're gonna deploy very soon a new tree viewer. So basically, the tree will have all the parts inside the same tab. Right now, we have the site planning tab that has everything else that is not an imported model, and you have the imported model separated in here. But that dynamic tree viewer will give you the ability to see all of them in one single spot, and you're going to be able to group them by different methods, right? So these are the first three methods that we're going to use: the object type with a model tree, the IFC structure, and the start date using the IFC structure as well. So I have an example over here in a test scenario to show you how that works. So this test scenario has a demolition stage created over there, and I created like a very simple sequence. I completely ignore structure and architecture and just show the whole thing at once, but it's just like a quick way to create a sequence. But this is using the new tree structure, as you can see over here on the side. And this new tree structure is showing everything in the same tab, and you have a tab over here for imported models. And just to make it clear, we also grouped all the resources inside one group. Right before, we had all of these resources in the site planning tab. They were expanded in here. So now there is a specific group for that. So you can change the way that you see this tree structure. The first one is by the object type, right? So the object type is basically what you already see in cmBuilder. Like the imported models will follow the same tree structure that you have in the file format. So it's kind of like the same idea, but with all the parts inside one single list. And the new ways of doing this is using the IFC structure as a structure as well. And this will give you, for the other parts, that doesn't make a lot of difference, because these are the parts they don't have an IFC structure. But for imported models, you see that even the icon changes over here. So the icon for the first one is the one that we have right now, but when you do IFC structure, you see the icons are a little bit different. And now um, you can see the exact IFC structure that you have for those parts in here, right? So divided by floor, but furthermore, you have the IFC classes inside. Before, we didn't have that. So just going back to this scenario where I compare the structures for different file formats, when I open an IFC file, as soon as I open the level for it, it will show everything inside one single flat list. But now you're going to be able to open the floor and see the IFC classes as well. So it's an extra level to help you select things fast and assign them to the milestones. Okay. And the next group method that we have is the start date plus IFC structure. This is great because it shows you all the parts that are assigned to a specific start date. This is a great way for you to like select a lot of things that are grouped together per date, right? So we are very excited about this one because it allows you to review your sequence in a more structured way without having to go for each one of the milestones and so on and so forth. You can simply find where parts are defined per milestone, right? So this is going to be our first step before we first step in towards creation of like a Gantt chart viewer or something like that in the future. But that's furthermore in the future. We are not working on this at the moment. There are more steps that we need to go to get to do before we get there. Okay, so this is like a great update that we're gonna have that will allow you to work with the parts that you have created and imported and also added to the software from the library and from the zone creations and so on in a very structured way. Cool. So this is our new and coming soon feature that I wanted to talk about. Now let's go into the tips and tricks. So the tips and tricks, this one, it was the first one was provided by Callum, and I really liked it because in this case over here, I kind of like use the zone to cover the whole area. But let's say that sometimes you do have a zone that you don't want to cover the whole area. You just want to cover, you would just want to remove that building that you have over here from the background. So what you can do with that, you can simply create a zone that will have that shape of the building. So let me position my camera here for a second. So you can create a zone that has the shape of that building, and within that shape, you define a color of that zone with a transparency that is similar to the color of your background, right? So it's not going to be, it's not always going to be perfect, but oh, I need to read.
Looks like we're having some technical difficulties with Pedro's headphones. In the meanwhile, if there's any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or in the QA section. We'll try to answer them now or at the end of the tips and tricks section. There we go.
Okay, cool. You think that after doing this for a bazillion times, I would remember to charge my phones before starting? But you'll be wrong. So yeah, as I was saying before, what we are working on over here is just like I'm gonna create a zone that's gonna be the same shape of my building. And when I do that, we will assign a color to it that's gonna look more or less like the background. So in this case over here, it doesn't look that much, and it will really depend what is the texture that you have in your background. But at least you can highlight that something happened with that building or it was removed. And then from the color picker, you can go in here and then choose a color that is more or less similar to the background of your area, right? But this is the hard one because you have to, there are like many areas over here that will have different colors, but at least you can define that like from this point onwards to this point, there is no building anymore, right? So otherwise it would look just like this. Cool. So this is a great way to do that. In some scenarios, this will work better than others because of the colors. But also, I would suggest you finding in Chrome extension or Edge extension, depending on the browser that you use, that would allow you to do a color picking from the website that you use. This one is like just one that I'm testing, that I tested today. But basically, that it has this button that you can simply select a color from your site, and then it will give you the hex code for it. And if you want to create something using that hex code, you can go into your zones, and I'm going to do something over here. But basically, to assign that hex code, you have to go into your color picker, and your transparency has to be all the way up. So it has to be 100% opaque. And then you click on this button over here, and now you have the hex code created for you. And then you can just copy paste this value into this area, and this will give you that color, okay? Or an approximation of that color. Cool. Just a quick tip to help you show those parts, that stage of demolishing, okay? So the next step that I want to show, next tips and tricks, is that now we just created like a new update that you can create slides with no duration, of like with really quick durations. So basically, if I go into a scenario that already has a sequence created, this is actually, let me open a better one. So this is something that a couple of customers requested, where they wanted to have a scenario that had slides with zero duration, because they wanted to create like a step a little bit faster of the construction, right? So if you go into your presentation mode in here, you can click in one of these slides, and now the duration can go up to 0. So it means that those parts are going to play a little bit faster. And just to
showcase that, there are two use cases that I envision for this. So one is whenever you're done with your model of your presentation, you want to create like a overview of what has been executed. You can create your camera angles, and in the last slide, you can create a couple of different camera views. And all of those, you can put them to have like a slide duration of 0. And now you just position your camera angle somewhere else. And then when you do it, create a new slide, put that to 0. Then go ahead and do this, create a new slide duration to 0. And then this one, right? So this is a great way for you to do that quick kind of like 360 overview of your project. And we're going to play this from the current slide so we can see that now the slides with the camera angle won't stop on a specific location, just going to keep rotating, right? So this is a great way for you to do that overview. Or sometimes you're going to have like a sequence of milestones that you want to quickly show that, like let's say a prefabricated project, for example, or repeated executions of typical levels. You can just assign the 0 duration for each one of those. So now in your presentation, whenever you send the slides, the presentation link to someone, that part of your presentation is going to go up a little bit faster. Cool. And the last tips and tricks that I want to talk about today is the fit out planning. So a couple of customers come to us asking about, can I do a fit out planning or like an interior renovation work with cmBuilder? You definitely can. And there are a couple ways to do that. This one is showing a complex model complex building that we already have models for. All the drywalls separated from the structure for the drywalls. Also, the MEP stuff are separated in different parts. Not always you're gonna get that, but if you do have a model that has more details for your fit out planning, you can create that sense of execution by simply going through these milestones and playing with the camera angles and whatnot, right? So this one over here is showing that shape. And when you go further, you can see that only the steel stud walls are executed. And when you go next, now you have your MPF stud stuff going on. And then you install your ceiling framing and so on and so forth, right? So the idea over here is to isolate a level if you can from your 3D model, or you can isolate that level inside cmBuilder or use a section to create that isolation or look at one level specifically. So for example, if I was working with this building and I want to do a fit out work, I would just go into my review function in here, create a section from the Z plane. This would take a while to compute everything, all the geometries, but once it's done, I can simply move that section up and down and start working with my fit out planning inside the platform, right? So this one, for example, I'm going to toggle the visibility of my section plane. And I have a section plane created in here. And from here, I can simply start adding objects, right? So these objects that you're adding from the library, they are going to find the correct elevation for your, let me just put this Z plane lower a little bit. So the Z plane is this green shape over here. You can double click on that and you can move it up and down, right? And I kind of prefer to work with the visibility turned off. And from here, you can start adding objects on top of this floor plan, right? So to do that with point-based objects, you simply select an object, let's say a lifting equipment in here, and I don't know, a genie. Let me find a good one. Maybe this one. Whoop, that's a way too big. But like you can simply go ahead and place this element in that area, right? It will find that tree structure, elevation. And for linear based objects, like say for example, doing a route and path with arrows for this area, we can go ahead and I selected the wrong one by mistake. But I can go ahead and start like drawing this shape. And the moment that I place my first point, it actually selected the wrong point over there, but I can click on my offset and then make it find that plane. sorry, let me just go down here. Let me bring this down. And we use that as our reference to define like paths and things inside that floor plan, right? So let me keep on moving with the sketch, and can create this sense of a path in here. It's gonna look a little bit weird because I didn't adjust that much, but let's go create like maybe something like this. Cool. So now you can annotate on top of that and create the sequence that you have for your fit out plan. Okay, I think that's it. And we're just gonna hang around a little bit to answer questions or redo a specific scenes that you guys want. And I'm gonna take a look over here in the chat to see if there's anything coming from you guys. But that's it for our agenda for today. Cam, do you have any comments? You want me to show a specific thing?
No, I have kind of a leading question. What would be the big reason you would want to use an IFC over an FBX for a file?
Yeah, so that we suggest IFC because the files are better structured and it's easier for you to get that file from consultants and also to export from Revit directly, right? So most of the BIM softwares, they can export to IFC directly, but also the files are lighter, right? In terms of like when you import them to BIM, the files are smaller, but also the performance of the file is better in terms of like when you convert them, because just the way that the files are structured, it makes it easier for cmBuilder to keep the performance in a better way. But also things like that, like the transparencies that come in, the IFC classes and the filters and whatnot, it's just like an easier file to work overall because of like a sum of small different things, you know.
There's also one other that I was hoping you'd mention, but so another good reason to use IFC over FBX is a lot of structural engineers or architectural engineers won't split things by level. So let's say a column, for example, would extend all the way from the bottom of the parkade all the way up to your 20th floor, which makes it really difficult to sequence, where IFC has a checkbox when exporting to split vertical elements by level.
From Revit, right? So when you export it from Revit, you can do that. One thing to keep in mind whenever you're doing that is that it's always good to check what is the definition of levels that you have in Revit, because a lot of times people would create a lot of levels, like top of slab, bottom of slab for each one of the stories. And if that's the case, your columns are going to be split in very small pieces, you know? So it's always good to check what is the definition of levels that you have in Revit before checking that, just to make sure that you're not going to like overkill your splitting function. But a good thing to know about this is that this feature is going to be inside cmBuilder very soon. We are working on the design for that, where you'll be able to create a set of like planes and whatnot, and those will be your splitting planes. So you'll be able to select the geometry and say, hey, use this other geometry as a reference and split it, right? So we already have like that working on our test environment, but it's just not fleshing out the details before we deploy. Oh.
We have a question from Terrace. Do you see that, Pedro?
Terrace.
So basically the question is how would the new dynamic tree feature and the ability to search by class be useful in creating a sequence for specific to fit out?
Yeah, so like that's a great question, because this dynamic tree, if your file format that you imported is an IFC, you now with the dynamic tree, I won't be able to show on the fit out because the dynamic tree is only available on our test environment. But if you do have the model as an IFC, you'll be able to reuse the IFC classes directly from the view, but also you can see all the parts that are assigned to different sequences, because we know that fit out sequences are a little bit more detailed per area and things like that. So it's a better way for you to visualize what is assigned to which area, right? Kyle, do you have anything to add to that? Okay, cool. But yeah, so basically it's just like a better way for you to visualize your tree structure. And if in the IFC file, I'm not sure if this one over here is an IFC file. Let me check. No, this is a step file. But if the IFC file has your stud walls and your drywall sheets separated per in the IFC kind of like structure, you will be able to manage them separately as well using the dynamic tree. Like you select just stud walls, show them at the milestone, then just the drywalls and show them at the milestone. Just the gypsum, actually. Cool. Awesome. I think that we don't have any more questions, so we can wrap it up over here. Again, if anyone have any questions, want to talk to our team, please reach out to us on the question mark. Go into the chat over here, and you can bug us as many times as you want. We love to interact with the customers over here. It's a very quick way to solve your questions and interact with you. We even go into quick calls right away, so please use the chat as much as you can. Okay, guys? And it's an actual person that you're talking to, is not an AI bot. I promise. People couldn't yet like figure a way to replicate our conscious into an AI bot. So for now, it's going to be a real person. Okay, cool. Thanks, everyone. Bye then.